Echoes of the lost. The transmission crackled through the quantum relay, carrying Damien's voice across impossible distances. "Nora, if you're hearing this, something's wrong." The ships. "They're not responding to hails. They're just—" Static consumed the words. Communications Officer Nora Blackwood pressed her headset closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Damien? Damien, respond!" Nothing. Colony Vega 7 had gone silent, joining 12 other settlements in the expanding void of lost voices. Nora stared at her console in the Earth Defense Network's communications hub, watching the blinking lights that represented humanity's reach into the stars go dark one by one. Another one? Captain Marcus Stone's voice carried both exhaustion and barely controlled rage. He stood behind her, close enough that she could smell his coffee and feel the warmth radiating from his uniform. 6 months of working together had built something between them. Professional respect that had deepened into stolen glances and lingering touches. "Vega 7, my brother was stationed." "There." Nora's voice cracked. She didn't turn around, afraid he might see the tears threatening to fall. Marcus placed his hand on her shoulder, his touch gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, Nora. We'll find answers. I promise." The communications center buzzed with frantic activity. Technicians hunched over their stations, trying desperately to reach colonies that had simply stopped. Families crowded the viewing galleries above, pressing against the reinforced glass, searching faces for hope that wouldn't come. Zara Chen Okafor burst through the security doors, her xenolinguistics tablet clutched in her hands. "Marcus, Nora, we've got something." "It's not good." She activated the main display, and an alien voice filled the room. The words were translated in real time, appearing as text below the audio waveform. The voice was calm, almost musical, but the message cut like ice. "Species of the third planet, your expansion ends here. Your colonies have been removed because they exceeded acceptable parameters. Remain within your system boundaries or face complete erasure. This communication concludes." Silence settled over the room like a shroud. Then someone sobbed. A mother who would never again hear her daughter's voice from the mining station on Kepler 442b. Others began to weep, their grief rippling through the crowd. Marcus felt Nora tremble beneath his hand. When she finally turned to face him, her eyes blazed with something more dangerous than sorrow. "They killed them all, just erased them like they never mattered." "They mattered," Marcus said, stepping closer. "They all mattered. And someone's going to pay for this." President Ava Kowalski's voice echoed through the emergency broadcast system. "Citizens of Earth, we stand at a crossroads. For too long, we believed the universe would welcome us with open arms. Today, we learned otherwise. But grief shared is strength multiplied. Tonight, we mourn. Tomorrow, we respond." In the weeks that followed, Earth transformed. The orbital shipyards that once built cargo vessels and research stations began crafting something darker. Massive forms took shape in the shadows above the planet, warships bearing the names of dead colonies. Nora found herself working 16-hour days, coordinating communication networks for the growing fleet. Marcus spent his time in strategy meetings, his jaw set in permanent determination. They stole moments together in empty corridors or during brief meal breaks, their connection deepening as Earth prepared for something that had never been attempted. War against an empire that spanned the stars. "Are we insane?" Nora asked one night as they stood on the observation deck, watching new ships emerge from the construction bays. "Fighting something that powerful?" Marcus pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her as if he could shield her from the universe's cruelty. "Maybe. But they made one mistake. They thought silence would break us. They don't understand humans very well." Above them, the ship named Vega 7 drifted past, its hull gleaming with fresh armor. In the darkness beyond, similar vessels waited like sleeping predators. Earth had received the alien ultimatum. Now it was time to send a reply. Not in words, but in fire and steel and the unbreakable will of a species that refused to quietly accept extinction. The colonies were gone, but their voices would be heard again, carried by the ships that bore their names into the dark between stars. Humanity's response was already building in orbit, silent and deadly, preparing to teach the galaxy what happened when you tried to erase the children of Earth. Shadows and Steel 6 months had passed since the ultimatum, and Earth's hidden war machine hummed with deadly purpose. In the classified levels beneath Luna Base, Dr. Amelia Cross ran her fingers along the prototype weapon housing, its dark metal warm to the touch, despite the frigid laboratory air. "Still here, Amelia?" Lieutenant Commander Jackson Rivera's voice carried exhaustion and something warmer, the tone he reserved for her alone. He leaned against the doorframe, his flight suit wrinkled from another reconnaissance mission into the void. "These plasma resonance cannons won't calibrate themselves," she replied, but her smile betrayed how much she'd missed him. 3 weeks he'd been gone, slipping through hegemony space like a ghost, mapping their defenses. Jackson crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Find me something that can punch through their shields?" "Better. I found something that can turn their shields into weapons against them." She turned in his embrace, studying his face. New lines creased his eyes, the price of dancing with death in alien territory. "What did you see out there?" "Arrogance," he said, his lips finding hers in a kiss that tasted of danger and longing. "They patrol like they own the universe. No urgency, no fear. They can't imagine anyone would dare strike first." Light years away, Hegemony Border Commander Kethvar studied his sensor logs with growing unease. Strange readings flickered at the edge of detection, ships that shouldn't exist, moving through space lanes that should be empty. His elongated skull ridges pulsed with a nervous rhythm as he compiled his report. "Submit it to High Command," his aide suggested, noting Kethvar's agitation. "I have, 3 times. They claim it's sensor shadows and cosmic debris." Kethvar's 4-chambered heart quickened. In his 2 centuries of service, he'd learned to trust his instincts. Something was coming. Back on Luna Base, Amelia guided Jackson to her private quarters, their bodies gravitating toward each other with the desperate intensity of lovers separated by war. Their uniforms fell away like discarded armor, revealing skin hungry for touch. "I thought about you every night out there," Jackson whispered against her throat as she pulled him down onto her bed. "In the dark between stars, you were the only light I could see." She responded with kisses that spoke of need and fear that each mission might be his last. Their lovemaking was tender and fierce, bodies moving together in the ancient dance of connection, finding solace in each other while the universe threatened to tear them apart. Later, as they lay intertwined, Amelia traced patterns on his chest. "The fleet trials start next week. My weapons, your tactics. We're actually going to do this, aren't we?" "We're going to make them pay for every colony they erased," Jackson said, his voice hard with promise. "Your brother on Kepler Station, my sister on New Geneva. All of them." In the orbital shipyards, massive vessels took their final form. The heavy cruiser New Geneva bristled with Amelia's plasma cannons. The stealth destroyer Kepler Station carried Jackson's modified fighter squadrons. Each ship represented more than military might. They were monuments to the dead, promises carved in metal and fire. President Kowalski addressed the secret fleet commanders via encrypted channels. "What we're about to attempt has never been done. We're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting to prove that bullies can be stopped. That genocide has consequences." Kethvar's latest sensor sweep detected something that made his blood freeze. Multiple contacts, moving in perfect formation, approaching the outer perimeter. He activated emergency protocols, but his communications array went dead. Then his shields. Then his weapons. The humans had arrived. From the bridge of the stealth ship Whisper, Jackson watched Kethvar's patrol vessel drift helplessly. "Signal the fleet. Phase 1 begins now." Across hegemony space, border stations simply vanished. No distress calls, no debris fields, no evidence they'd ever existed. The empire that had ruled through fear for millennia suddenly tasted it themselves. On Earth, families gathered around communication screens waiting for news. Nora Blackwood sat beside Marcus Stone in the command center, monitoring the silence where enemy chatter should be. "They're scared," she whispered, reading the encrypted reports flowing in. For the first time in 1,000 years, the hegemony doesn't know what's happening to their own forces. Marcus squeezed her hand. Good. Let them wonder. Let them fear the dark the way our people did. In his command ship, Kethavar drifted among the wreckage of his fleet, the sole survivor of humanity's opening move. He finally understood what the censor ghosts had been, harbingers of a war the hegemony never saw coming. The humans had learned to hunt in silence, and the galaxy would never be the same. First, Blood Colonel Diana Reeves checked her pulse rifle one final time as the assault transport approached the hegemony communications nexus. The massive station hung in space like a crystalline spider, its communication arrays reaching into the dark like grasping claws. 30 seconds to breach, announced Thomas Nakamura from the pilot's seat. Once a naval engineer, he'd volunteered for combat duty after losing his parents on Colony Titan's Rest. Diana watched his steady hands guide their ship through the station's defensive grid, admiring both his skill and the way his jaw clenched with determination. "You sure about this trajectory?" she asked, moving closer to review his calculations. "Trust me," he said, glancing back at her with a smile that made her pulse quicken despite the approaching danger. "I designed half the systems we're about to disable." Their relationship had bloomed during training, professional respect evolving into stolen conversations, then heated arguments about tactics that ended with desperate kisses in empty supply closets. War had a way of stripping away pretense, revealing what truly mattered. The transport shuddered as they pierced the station's hull. Diana's commando team moved like liquid shadow through the corridors, their modified armor absorbing both sound and sensor pings. They encountered the first hegemony defenders at Junction 7. The aliens were tall, graceful creatures with chitinous exoskeletons and multifaceted eyes that reflected the emergency lighting like broken mirrors. They'd ruled the galaxy for so long that combat had become theoretical to them, a concept for lesser species. Diana's team proved how wrong they were. Station Commander Velthar had overseen this communications hub for 40 standard years. Nothing had ever threatened it. The facility floated in a region of space considered absolutely secure, protected by a fleet that had never known defeat. Now alarms screamed through his command center as impossible things happened. His shields failed without explanation. His weapons wouldn't respond. Hull breaches appeared in sections that should have been impenetrable. "How many attackers?" he demanded, his translator rendering his panic in flat human speech. "Unknown, Commander. Our internal sensors show ghosts. They're everywhere and nowhere." Velthar's mandibles clicked with fear. In the old stories his species told their young, there were creatures called shadow hunters, mythical beings that struck from darkness and left only silence behind. He was beginning to believe the myths. Diana moved through the station's corridors with deadly grace, Thomas by her side. Their mission was surgical: disable communications, download intelligence, and vanish before reinforcements arrived. But when they reached the central hub, they discovered something that changed everything. "Tom, look at this." Diana's voice carried a mixture of awe and horror as she accessed the alien data cores. "It's not just us. They've done this before, dozens of species, maybe hundreds. All erased, all silenced." Thomas interfaced his portable systems with the alien networks, his engineer's mind racing through the data streams. "Diana, these files, they're genocide records. Entire civilizations cataloged and destroyed. We're not their first victims. We're just the first to fight back." She pulled him into an alcove as alien security forces rushed past. In that moment of concealment, with death surrounding them, she kissed him with fierce desperation. "Promise me something," she whispered. "If we don't make it out—" "We're making it out," he interrupted, his hands cupping her face. "We're going home and we're taking this intelligence with us. The galaxy needs to know what these monsters really are." The battle for the communications hub lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, Velthar floated in the ruins of his command center, emergency lights casting eerie shadows on his carapace. The humans had taken everything: data cores, communication logs, strategic databases, and vanished as silently as they'd come. For the first time in his life, Velthar truly understood fear. Across hegemony space, similar scenes played out. Supply depots erupted in flames. Command posts went dark. Patrol fleets found their bases reduced to drifting wreckage. Each strike was swift, brutal, and completely unexpected. Back on Earth, Diana and Thomas debriefed their mission in the secure briefing room. The stolen intelligence painted a picture of evil that staggered even hardened military minds. President Kowalski reviewed the files with growing horror. "How many?" she asked quietly. "Conservative estimate?" 1,200 species over the past millennium, Diana reported. They call it pruning the garden, preventing younger races from reaching technological maturity. Thomas pulled up a holographic display showing the hegemony's expansion over centuries. "They're not just an empire, they're the ultimate predator. They feed on the death of civilizations." That night, as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, Nora Blackwood monitored the communications. Alien chatter filled with confusion, fear, and the first whispers of a word that hadn't been spoken in the hegemony's territory for centuries: defeat. "They're calling us the Silent Death," she reported to Marcus. "Their own border commanders are requesting permission to retreat." Marcus studied the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. "Good, let them run. Let them carry word back to their superiors that humanity is no longer prey." In the deepest vaults of the hegemony high command, ancient beings who remembered the fall of 1,000 worlds felt something they had not experienced in millennia: uncertainty. The humans weren't behaving like victims. They were behaving like hunters, and the galaxy was about to learn the difference between the two. The turning tide Admiral Helena Cross stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship Retribution, watching the massive hegemony fleet assemble in the Proxima Nexus. 250 alien warships formed a crescent of death, their hulls black as night, weapons charged and ready. It was the largest force the Empire had mobilized in 5 centuries. "They mean to end this quickly," observed Commander Gabriel Santos from his position at the tactical console. Helena's second in command for 3 years. He'd become much more than that in recent months, though they'd kept their relationship carefully professional until now. "Let them try," Helena replied, her voice steady despite the odds. Earth's fleet numbered only 80 ships, but they carried humanity's rage and something the hegemony had forgotten: the willingness to die for a cause greater than themselves. Gabriel moved closer, close enough that she could smell his aftershave over the recycled air. "Helena, before this starts, I need you to know—" "I know," she said softly, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "I know, Gabriel. After this is over, we'll talk about it properly. Right now, we have a war to win." High Archon Zixthul commanded the hegemony force from his flagship Eternal Dominion, a vessel the size of a small moon. For 800 years, he had overseen the pruning of upstart species. The humans would be his greatest triumph, a reminder to the galaxy that the old order still held sway among the stars. "Signal the human fleet," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Offer them one final chance to surrender. We are not without mercy." The response that came back contained no words, only a stream of data. Ship names, colony designations, population figures. It took Zixthul's analysts several minutes to understand what they were seeing. "It's a memorial list," his aide whispered. "Every settlement we destroyed, every life we ended. They're making sure we know exactly what we're being held accountable for." Zixthul felt something cold settle in his primary stomach. These creatures weren't seeking terms. They were delivering judgment. The battle began at 1427 Standard Time when human stealth ships materialized within the hegemony formation. The aliens had expected the humans to maintain distance, to fight defensively. Instead, Earth's forces dove straight into the heart of their fleet like avenging angels. Helena watched the tactical display as her ships executed maneuvers no sane commander would attempt. The destroyer Vega 7 flew directly through a battleship's weapon formation, its shields ablaze, but its guns never ceasing fire. The cruiser New Geneva rammed a hegemony command vessel, both ships disappearing in a fireball that lit the void. "Gabriel, Redirect Squadron 7 to protect the Titan's rest. She's taking heavy fire. Already done, he replied, his hands dancing over the controls with practiced efficiency. Despite the chaos around them, Helena felt a surge of affection for this man who knew her thoughts before she spoke them. Aboard the Hegemony flagship, alarms shrieked as human ships targeted Eternal Dominion's weapon arrays with suicidal precision. Zixthul watched in growing horror as vessels barely a fraction of his ship's size inflicted damage that should have been impossible. "How are they penetrating our shields?" he demanded. "They're not penetrating them, Archon," his chief engineer reported. "They're turning our own defensive systems against us. Their weapons create resonance cascades that—" The explanation was cut short as the Retribution emerged from behind a debris field, all guns blazing. Helena had brought her flagship directly into weapons range of the enemy command vessel, accepting devastating damage to deliver a crippling blow. "Helena!" Gabriel shouted as the bridge shook under enemy fire. "Hull breach on Deck 7. We're losing atmospheric integrity. Emergency repairs," she ordered, then opened a channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross. Look around you. See those burning hulls? Those are the ships of the Empire that tried to erase us. Today we show the galaxy that humanity cannot be silenced." The tide of battle began to turn. Hegemony ships, designed for overwhelming superior forces, struggled against an enemy that refused to follow conventional tactics. Human vessels fought like wounded animals, accepting destruction to inflict damage far beyond their weight class. Zixthul watched his formation crumble with disbelief. Ships that had dominated space lanes for centuries were being destroyed by creatures that had barely left their home system. When his own flagship shuddered under sustained fire, he made a decision that would echo through galactic history. "Signal retreat," he commanded. The words fell like stones into silence. For the first time in a millennium, the Hegemony was withdrawing from battle. As alien ships fled the field, Helena allowed herself a moment of exhaustion. The Retribution was battered, her crew bloodied, but they had done the impossible. Gabriel appeared at her side, a medical kit in his hands to treat the cut on her forehead. "You're hurt," he said gently. "We won," she replied, hardly believing it herself. "Gabriel, we actually won." He cupped her face in his hands, heedless of the bridge crew around them. "I love you, Helena. I've loved you since the day we first served together. If this battle taught me anything, it's that life is too short to hide from what matters." She kissed him then, in front of the entire bridge crew, as Earth's battered fleet floated among the wreckage of the invincible Hegemony force. Around them, the communication channels crackled with impossible words: victory, triumph, hope. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived in fear for centuries looked up at the stars and whispered prayers of gratitude. The humans had done what no one thought possible. They had made the Hegemony bleed, and once an empire starts bleeding, it never truly stops. Silent victory 1 year after the Battle of Proxima Nexus. Ambassador Chen Wei walked through the crystal corridors of the neutral station Harmony's Edge, his diplomatic credentials allowing him access to chambers where the fate of the galaxy was being negotiated. The Hegemony's once mighty empire was fracturing, rebellions blooming on 100 worlds as species long thought extinct emerged from hiding. Waiting for him in the primary negotiation chamber was Nixandra, the Hegemony's chief diplomatic envoy. Her species was aquatic in origin, with translucent skin that revealed the slow pulse of bioluminescent organs beneath. Despite their different evolutionary paths, Chen found himself drawn to her intelligence, her quiet dignity in the face of her empire's collapse. "Ambassador Chen," she said, her translator rendering her complex vocalizations into perfect Mandarin, a gesture of respect that hadn't gone unnoticed during their months of careful negotiation. "I trust your journey was comfortable?" "As comfortable as any travel through space recently liberated from your empire's control," he replied, but his tone held no malice. They had moved beyond hostility weeks ago, finding common ground in their shared desire to prevent further bloodshed. They had been dancing this diplomatic waltz for months, two representatives of species that should have been enemies, finding themselves drawn together by mutual respect and something neither dared name. Their late-night discussions had evolved from formal negotiations to intimate conversations about philosophy, loss, and the possibility of redemption. On Earth, President Eva Kowalski reviewed the latest intelligence reports with satisfaction. The hegemony's military had withdrawn to their core systems, abandoning the outer territories as rebellion after rebellion drained their resources. Humanity's example had lit a fire that was consuming an empire, built on 1,000 years of oppression, madam. President, reported General Marcus Stone, recently promoted. After his role in coordinating Earth's response, our long-range scouts confirmed that the Kepler Liberation Front has successfully taken control of 3 more systems. The Andorians have declared independence, and the Centauri Collective is actively recruiting other species for a defensive alliance. Beside him, Nora Blackwood, now Director of Interspecies Communications, added, "We're receiving requests for assistance from 17 different species. They want to know how we did it, how we fought back against the hegemony, and won." Marcus and Nora had married 6 months earlier in a ceremony attended by the surviving crews of Earth's fleet. Their wedding had been broadcast across the human colonies, now being rebuilt with better defenses and fierce determination. They represented something precious, love that had grown in the shadow of war, hope that had survived the darkest hours. Back on Harmony's edge, Chen and Nixandra worked late into the station's artificial night cycle, crafting agreements that would reshape the galaxy's political landscape. During a break, they found themselves standing before the station's great observation window, watching stars that no longer seemed quite so cold or distant. "Do you ever wonder what might have been different?" Nixandra asked, her voice carrying harmonics that the translator couldn't quite capture. "If our species had met under other circumstances?" Chen moved closer to her, drawn by the sadness in her bioluminescent patterns. "I think about it often." "Your people aren't inherently evil, Nixandra. You were trapped by a system that had existed for so long that no one questioned its necessity." She turned to face him, her large eyes reflecting the starlight. "And yet we perpetrated genocide for a millennium. How does one species forgive another for such crimes?" "By proving that the future can be different from the past," Chen replied. He reached out tentatively, touching the membrane of her hand with his fingertips. The gesture was intimate, crossing species lines in a way that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Their relationship had developed slowly, built on respect and understanding rather than physical attraction. Yet there was something beautiful in their connection, proof that even the most unlikely beings could find common ground. The final treaty was signed 3 weeks later. The hegemony formally recognized the independence of all liberated worlds and agreed to reparations for the species they had destroyed. More importantly, they accepted oversight from a new galactic council, with Earth holding a permanent seat. "You realize," Nixandra said to Chen during their private farewell, "that my people will likely exile me for these agreements. I will be seen as the one who dismantled our empire." "Then come with me," Chen offered impulsively. "Earth has always welcomed refugees. Help us build something better than either of our civilizations achieved alone." She considered his offer. Her patterns shifting to colors he had learned indicated deep thought. "I would like that very much." On Earth, the celebration was muted but meaningful. Families gathered in the rebuilt colonies, their children playing under skies that no longer held the threat of sudden death. In the orbital shipyards, construction continued. Not warships now, but exploration vessels and trading craft that would carry humanity's message of hope to the stars. Admiral Helena Cross and Commander Gabriel Santos announced their engagement at the treaty celebration, their love story becoming a symbol of how beauty could emerge from the crucible of war. Diana Reeves and Thomas Nakamura opened a joint military academy, training the next generation of defenders. While building a life together on the rebuilt colony Vega 7, Jackson, Rivera, and Dr. Amelia Cross continued their work, developing new technologies, but now their efforts focused on healing rather than destruction, creating medical innovations that would benefit all species in the liberated territories. The galaxy had learned a crucial lesson. Silence imposed through fear would always eventually face silence chosen through strength. The hegemony's greatest weapon, the terror that kept species isolated and helpless, had been turned against them by a species that refused to accept extinction. In the rebuilt communication center on Earth, Nora Blackwood monitored the chatter from 1,000 worlds. Where once there had been the enforced quiet of oppression, now there was the joyful noise of free beings talking, trading, dreaming, and building together. The colonies were being rebuilt, their names once again lighting up on stellar maps. But they were no longer alone, no longer vulnerable. They were part of something larger, a community of species that had learned the most important lesson in the galaxy's history. Sometimes the greatest victory is not conquering your enemies, but teaching them to fear the consequences of their cruelty. And sometimes, in the silence that follows war, the most beautiful sound is the voice of hope, spreading from world to world, proving that in the vast darkness between stars, no one ever has to stand alone again. The stars were no longer silent. They sang with the voices of the free,